That incident, it also brings urgency to how important this cause is and why we are here today, why we gather to talk about such an important topic and how we can make a difference in domestic violence and intimate partner violence. 3 years ago, Lieutenant Governor and DPS sat down and began discussing how can we start initiating a lethality assessment protocol. What does that look like, and how can we use that tool to impact and create a safer environment for everyone in Utah? She championed this cause through a family tragedy and the loss of her cousin Mandy. She took that tragedy, turned it into passion, and together with all the stakeholders and more, we've been able to move the needle on that and start creating a system that can make a difference in our community. Through those partnerships, in 2023, Senate Bill 117 was passed by the legislature. This created what we know as the LAP, the Lethality Assessment Protocol. And with that, it gives officers on scene a tool to identify the threat to victims and realize the seriousness of the situation that they're involved in. It also gives them a tool to connect them with service providers, which is an important part to that process. Since the implementation of that bill, 23,000 laps have been conducted. 60% of those show a high probability for violence. Not just violence, potentially lethal violence between those partners. That should cause us all to pause and really realize the seriousness of the situation we're dealing with. The LAP not only identifies victims at risk, like I said, it also gives the officers a tool to connect them with services and help them through that process. During that process, officers on scene take information in real time, pass that on to the statewide Information and Analysis Center, better known as our SIAC, and on average, in 15 minutes, they can return a product back to the officer while they're still there with the victim to give them better information, connect them with the services, and categorize, put them into a category that helps them assess that risk of how much danger they're truly in. And that's been a great tool, a tool that's being used statewide, a tool that's mandated statewide. And today we're here because we're excited to announce the next step. To move this process forward even further, we're here to announce Utah's new interactive LAP dashboard. This dashboard will be able to help us collect data, or as we collect data, this dashboard will help us to be able to make that data visible to all the stakeholders, to lawmakers, to law enforcement officers, to service providers, so we can all gain a better grasp of what is going on in this world and where are the gaps. How do we start moving the needle even further to identify those gaps and address them? Domestic violence is one of the most dangerous calls there is, whether that's for the victim or the officers on scene. We owe it to those people involved to use every tool at our discretion to improve that public safety. The dashboard is more than data. It's lives saved, families protected, and safer communities. And lastly, I just want to say that none of this would be possible without Lieutenant Governor Henderson for taking a family tragedy, turning it into a passion to promote change. And with that, it's my honor to turn the time over to her.
Well, thank you so much, Commissioner Mason, and to everybody who has really worked hard to make the lethality assessment protocol statewide. To implement this program, it's really important. I want to, before I get started, I want to acknowledge my aunt, Shauna Main, who is here with us today. Shauna is Mandy's mother. I also brought Mandy over here. 3 years ago, Sunday was the anniversary. Sunday was the anniversary, the third anniversary of that terrible day that Mandy lost her life to domestic violence, to intimate partner violence. And the day that I realized this terrible gap that we had in the system this lethal gap that we had in the system, where law enforcement officers from one jurisdiction were not maybe necessarily getting the information that they needed to make wise discretionary decisions on the spot, on the scene of a call. Sometimes a situation doesn't look all that bad on the surface, but if you dig deeper and you have more context and more information, that is important information that law enforcement needs to be able to assess what needs to happen in that moment and assess what needs to happen with the victim and the offender. But more importantly than that, the second piece of that was connecting victims who were at high risk of lethality to services. So I want to thank our victim advocates who have worked so hard and have really borne the brunt of this bill, this law. This really stretched their resources. Yes, they got some funding, wasn't nearly enough. It never is. I know there's been further funding cuts that have impacted these services, and we need to do better. But the victim advocate community have really stepped up to wrap their arms around victims, survivors, help them understand the situation they're in, help them get resources they need to better their lives. I also have to give a shout out to Sergeant Famuina, Captain Jensen, and the others who went around the state to implement this. They spend a lot of time going everywhere to all these different police agencies to educate and inform and train and implement this new law a couple of years ago. And I encourage law enforcement agencies. I know there's still some that are struggling a little bit in various ways, and I encourage them to identify the barriers that are holding them back. Bring that to the attention of people who can help. We want to help make sure that this really, truly is implemented significantly and thoroughly statewide. I also want to thank the legislature, specifically the bill sponsor, Senator Weiler, who is not here yet. I think he's coming. And of course, Representative Wilcox, who is here, for championing this cause and being such a good partner and a good advocate for victims, for survivors, for families, and for law enforcement in this state. I look forward to the next steps. Data is important. The faces and the names and the families behind the data are even more important. And what we do with this data, what we do with this information is critical, because information is only good if we use it. So I'm excited about the fact that we can now have information that can be analyzed, can be researched, can be used to make better public policy decisions that will affect the lives of victims and offenders. That's the second piece to this. We need two tracks. Right now, we kind of have one track. We've got the victim track, and we need to get that offender track put in place because we care about them too. And we want everyone in our state to be successful and happy. And sometimes that requires law enforcement intervention. Sometimes that requires better training. Sometimes it requires therapy. We need to figure all of that out. And I'm excited about the prospects of helping figure that out as we move forward, and grateful to all of those who have worked on that. This is a situation, these deaths are preventable. They are preventable. There have been dozens of them since this law was enacted 2 years ago. And I look forward to the day when we've rooted out this scourge in our society. Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you all for being here. In representation of South Valley Services, our local Salt Lake County victim service provider, and on behalf of all the survivors that we serve every day, I'd like to thank DPS and UDVC for putting this together. And also to thank our elected officials here today for helping draw much needed attention to this issue. Far too many families and communities are impacted by the devastating reality of domestic violence happening here in our own state, affecting our neighbors, our coworkers, our friends, and for too many, it's happening to family members. This issue is personal, and even if we aren't experiencing it directly, we all know and care about someone who is impacted directly. And because we know domestic violence only escalates without intervention, lives are at risk. Every day, both here in Salt Lake County and in all corners of our state, I have personally witnessed the devastation this epidemic has caused in multiple communities, in multiple counties across Utah. And I can attest to the fact that this issue does not discriminate, and it is a real threat to the neighborhoods and all demographics that live around us. And consequently, lives are taken that can never be given back. So it is imperative that we invest and we find solutions to help prevent this from continuing. Fortunately, we have learned through the lethality assessment protocol that victims can and are getting connected to life-saving services, and more survivors are accessing services and support than they would have otherwise. Legislation now ensures all law enforcement agencies around the state are partnering with domestic violence shelters and connecting high-risk victims to life-saving services. All domestic violence shelters in Utah also have confidential 24-hour helplines where they administer the lethality screening questions directly as well. And victims can call anonymously if they're apprehensive about breaking their silence and about their anonymity. And loved ones can also ask about questions regarding services and how to help a loved one. More survivors are reaching out directly to help themselves, and more survivors are discovering options and alternatives to a life of fear and uncertainty about what the next day might hold, giving them a chance at a violence-free future. And although we're making tremendous progress, many still remain in silence and in need of help. So we need our community to take this issue personal. It is personal. This is not happening out there to those people. It's happening here. These are our people. These are our friends. These are our neighbors. And these people need us in their corner, every one of us. Victims need you, their neighbors, their friends, their coworkers, their church communities. They need their loved ones to learn about the warning signs so they can help detect it. They need to learn how to ask if they need help. They need us to listen and believe them, and to learn about the services that are available in all the communities across our state. Visit your local domestic violence service provider websites. Go to utvc.org. Take it upon yourself to learn more so that you can be a resource and a support for the people that you love. This issue needs everyone's attention, and victims need your support. Their lives literally depend on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Lindsay. I'm going to start where she left off. It is personal. And until you are called at the last minute, and in my case, by a friend or a family member, and asked to come rescue someone over the holiday because they're not safe, I don't think it quite hits the same as when you're talking about it in a committee. And so you're calling your law enforcement friends and say, what do I do with all the firearms? They can't stay there, right? I'm glad that Commissioner Mason, I believe he was confirmed yesterday, right? That happened? Okay, good. I'm glad that Commissioner Mason started recognizing the reality of what we saw in Tremont on Sunday. We lost 2 officers who aren't coming home. I've been to way too many of those funerals. Glad to hear that the deputy and the canine that were also shot weren't murdered as well. That murderer, that wasn't his first experience with us. And it wasn't his first experience with domestic violence or the LAP protocol. That had been issued to that murderer, to that victim in his case. And it gave us some information. And I promise you, I have not spoken with the LG about what the next steps and our plans are yet. And she already announced them to you. We're missing the boat on what happens with those who are the perpetrators. We had him. We issued the protocol. It gave us the information we were looking for, and he didn't murder her at that time. And in the back of my mind all week, ever since I read the report, has been, what should we have done differently then that would have prevented the loss of life of these officers now? It goes on. It ripples. The beautiful thing, one of the beautiful things about today's announcement, about what DPS has done with the LAP dashboard, is that it fits right in line with the public safety data portal work that we've been doing the last 4 years. That's just about ready to go live. In fact, we're going to require it in the next iteration of the bill for the public. That information will allow us to put that whole picture together, help us to make the better decisions that we're looking for that actually keep people safe. I was telling Lindsay and the Lieutenant Governor before this that I was a little surprised, and maybe I shouldn't have been, at how busy we made her with the implementation of the LAP protocol. We hoped that it would save some lives. We hoped that it would work. We didn't realize the depth of how many, frankly, how many would need to be added that we would find. That's what I expect will happen as we hone these tools, and we'll uncover more things. We'll understand better how to help. We'll understand better how to prevent and understand how to get ahead of it so that we don't have to be here having these conversations again. Thank you for being here today with us. We're grateful for the work of the Lieutenant Governor of DPS. I'm thrilled that Bo is the new commissioner. You're always a little worried, by the way, when this big changes happen because of his passion on the topic. And thank you, Captain Jensen, for all your work, and of course, UVDC that's brought us here too. Because I'm now speaking for the Senate. I hope Todd's okay for the record, but I wouldn't be up here either without Senator Weiler and his passion on making sure that it happened and got through, and his continued, I have spoken with him quite a bit about what our next steps need to be, and I know that he's just as passionate about making sure it happens. So we appreciate our partnership with the administration and look forward to answering any questions if there are any. Thank you.
Thank you to all our speakers, and thank you to our media members. This concludes the formal part of the press event, but we will be available for one-on-ones. Lieutenant Governors, if you want an interview with her, we will ask you to go towards the area where Mandy is at with James, if you can raise your hand right there. And then we will also have UDVC and CCJJ and SIAC representatives, aside from our speakers, available for one-on-one interviews. Thank you.